Do you ever feel like some relationships in your life just feel kind of weird? Like, even when you like or care about a person, it still kind of feels like the conversation is missing a page.
Yeah, it's like you're in some stage play and someone randomly changed the script but forgot to tell you. And you're just kind of standing there, like trying to make sense of it, but you probably look confused. I mean, despite your best effort.
And look, it's not always big stuff. It's little things, and they build up, and you're kind of left wondering, like, well, how did we get here?
Yeah, but that space, that weird tension, that's the gap that we talk about. And today we're not going to try to fix it all, but we do want to talk about what this is and how it functions.
Yeah, because ignoring it definitely doesn't make it go away.
Absolutely not. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Nature of Everything podcast with Bo and Clint, where we deep dive into the world of personal development through coin. Confirm it, own it, be intentional, and change the nature of everything.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nature of Everything, where we use COIN, an acronym that stands for Confirm It, Own It, Be Intentional, and Change the Nature of Everything. We use COIN to unpack the messy and honest and the meaningful parts of just being authentically human.
I'm Clint, and as always, here's Bo, and today we're talking about relationships, and not the kind from rom-coms, but we're talking about the real ones, the ones that drift and shift around, and sometimes they feel like they're somehow operating on a weird delay.
Yeah, this episode is about understanding the space between where a relationship is and where you wish it was. That space is the gap. And if you've ever found yourself wondering, like, why does this feel off? You're in the right place. And this isn't just about romantic relationships. It's about all types of interpersonal relationships that we have.
And we'll share how the COIN process gives you a way to work through those disconnects without needing some psychology degree or a crystal ball or something.
Look, and if you want to go deeper, we did write a book about all of this. It's called COIN. Confirm it, own it, be intentional, and change the nature of everything in your life. And you can grab a copy at coinyourlife.com.
Also, if you're not already following us on all the socials, now's a great time to plug in as well. So just search Coin Your Life on Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you name it, all of those out there. And this is where we share everything from podcast drops to daily reflections. And occasionally we even throw a meme out there that might hit a little close to home.
So whether it's your partner, your kid, your coworker, or just that friend who's been meaning to call you back since 2021, this episode's probably for you.
And look, we're not here to fix every relationship that you've got, but we are here to ask honest questions and see how COIN can help you show up better for those relationships that you are striving to improve.
All right, so let's talk about what we actually mean when we say the gap. Because if you're going to work through something, you've got to be able to name it.
Absolutely. And when it comes to relationships, like we mentioned before, the gap is that space between where things are and where you wish them to be.
Yeah, and that might mean you feel emotionally distant from your partner, like the two of you are just managing life like roommates.
Or it might mean something like you're showing up for your kids, like especially when they're older. You know, when one day they're cracking jokes with you and the next day, it's like you're speaking two totally different languages. If you don't understand like deep sighs and slam doors, I mean, this is a good place to start.
Yeah, and it also happens with friends, right? The gap can be that slow fade. We're used to talk all the time, but now it's been 6 months and you're both just kind of pretending like it's fine.
I said it's fine. Yeah, and even like at work, in your professional settings, there could be something that changes with somebody that you've always gotten along with or you generally just vibe with. So maybe that coworker or a supervisor or your boss or something like that, where it used to be cool and everything was working out, maybe now it's just like short replies and this, cold sort of polite awkwardness.
Yeah, and look, the thing is, the gap doesn't always show up as conflict. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's just a subtle feeling that something's off.
Yeah, and realistically, the longer we avoid it, the wider that gap grows. So first, we've got to spot it. And like you mentioned, we got to give it a name. What's a name for this?
And you know what? Gaps in human relationships, like they don't stay in their own lane.
No, they don't. You're right. They leak and they spill out and they spill over, and they sneak into places they don't actually have any business being.
I agree. Like you could have a tense moment with your boss at 9 a.m. and then suddenly at dinner you're snapping at your partner because the broccoli's overcooked.
Right. And let's be like, what did the broccoli do? It's just sitting there trying to be nutritious. Why are you so mad at it?
Exactly. Like, and sometimes it goes the other way. Like you're feeling distant from your partner and now you're oversharing with your coworkers because you just needed somebody to connect with. And then that gets weird and they don't like you anymore.
Right. And you know what? And that's real. I mean, these little emotional spillovers, they happen because humans are messy and we're complicated. And as best as we try, I mean, we carry our stuff around with us. So, I mean, whether we mean to or not.
Yeah. And, there's a quote I love from Esther Perel. She says the quality of your life ultimately depends on the quality of your relationships. And I think that's true.
Sure.
Because when something's off in a relationship, it doesn't just stay there. It kind of impacts how we show up everywhere.
Yeah, and look, none of us are out here just batting 1,000 in our relationships. I mean, there's rocks and bumps everywhere, and we're all trying though. We're all giving it the best we got. And look, we've all eaten the cold chicken nuggets over the sink while we're like stress texting someone, and that we care about. We're just trying to push the gas on fixing this.
Cold chicken nuggets, huh? That's oddly specific.
Well, it's oddly common, I'm sure, as well. So don't act like you hadn't had the cold chicken nuggets, dude.
Look, that's fair, but that is the point. Like we're reacting to things without realizing we're reacting, and that's where coin becomes such a powerful pause.
So when the gap in one place, really starts showing up somewhere else, I agree with you, man. That it really is important to stop and ask, like, is this really about what's happening right now, or is this about that other stuff that I've been carrying around all day, all week, all month, whatever it may be?
Yeah, and look, here's the truth. Most of us don't like to admit it, but when you lash out at the wrong person, you kind of know it. Maybe not in the moment, but that pit in your stomach will start to show up fast.
Yeah, and it's something that you've dragged in from somewhere else, and now you're throwing it around like it belongs at this person. And I get it. You're right. Most of the time it doesn't belong there.
Yeah, look, that really hits home. I mean, I'm thinking of the times that, like, maybe I snap at my kids when I'm really just stressed about work. And this is where coin just isn't helpful. It's really necessary. Because when you feel yourself getting reactive, coin really gives you a way to kind of snap out of that.
Sure. So start with confirm it. Like, what's actually happening right now? Are you upset about what this person has actually said? Or are you mad because you're like holding on to a fight from, earlier, 3 days ago, maybe?
Exactly. And then you got to own it. And that means actually own it, not halfway, not I'm sorry you feel that way. I hate that one. You have to own it like, hey, I brought this into the room. That was me. This is mine. That's ownership.
Sure. And once again, it's not about blaming yourself for everything. It's about not pretending the gap is all them when you know damn well, like, you've been emotionally checked out or playing at something too. So you've been dancing around it, and you've got to own that. You've got to know that. But it's not about blame. It's about ownership.
Yeah. And look, once you've owned it, you have to be intentional. You have to decide what you're actually trying to do, what you're actually trying to accomplish. Are you trying to get closer, or are you just trying to win?
Yeah, because honestly, you can't do both.
Yeah, and you know what? The nature is going to change. And that doesn't always mean fixing the relationship on the spot. Sometimes it just means stopping the bleed, saying something honest, owning your energy, being human enough to say, you know what, I was being an asshole, and now I see it.
Sure, and here's the kicker. If you don't coin that in these moments, I really feel like, for me, the gap gets wider, like, every time. And for what it's worth, I feel like that's the cost of doing nothing.
Yeah, so let's break something down that we lay out pretty clearly in the book. because this is a real game changer. It's the difference between crossing the gap and closing it.
Okay, so crossing the gap, it's your work product. It's that emotional and mental processing, like assessing the distance between here and where you're wanting to be. You get to look at what's missing and what's changed, like what's been said. I don't know, maybe more importantly, maybe what hasn't been said. This is where you get to pause, like you were talking about before, and ask those real questions. What do you want this relationship to look like? What do you want this friendship to look like? What do you want these interactions to, how do you want them to feel and look? But also it's important, I think, what would I miss if all of this ended today? You know, am I still in this because it's serving both of us? Or, you know, the flip side of this, am I afraid to say no to some of this as well? So I think there's just a lot into that crossing aspect of the gap.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is crossing. I mean, that's standing on your side and actually looking across at the truth and not the fantasy and not the past, but literally what's right in front of you.
Certainly. So with that in mind, if you look at what closing the gap is, that next step, that's where you actually take the opportunity to apply the work. You take all of that crossing work product, and then you get to apply it with the closing of the gap. But here's the catch, though. You don't get to always control all of that. You can't.
Not in relationships.
No, because you can't force someone to necessarily meet you halfway or part of the way or any of it. If they won't, you don't get to pretend that it's your job, as it were, your responsibility to own or fix the whole thing.
I agree. And look, I feel like we need to be very clear. Like, we're not here to play therapist, but we are here to tell the truth. And the truth is, some relationships don't close. And it's not because you didn't try, but maybe the other person didn't want to play. And that's a brutal kind of ownership. But it also is the kind that can free you, because crossing the gap, that's where your growth lives. That's where your clarity lives.
Well, and like you said, I mean, closing it, I mean, it is optional. In relationships, it requires that partnership and a mutual effort. And if it's not there, you're right. The relationship gap may not close the way you want it, but you still get to move forward. It might look a little different.
Let's continue on some of that conversation. Here's a part that nobody likes to think about. Like, what happens when that gap closes and you didn't even get a say in it?
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, because that can happen in all kinds of ways. Like, anybody could leave suddenly, or, I mean, they may pass away, they may die. And, you know, this relationship somehow ends without the closure you really wanted from it, or you didn't get the closure that feels right to you.
Yeah, we both lost people. Sure. And one thing I've learned when someone's gone is, like, then somehow we tend to sanctify them. Like, all their flaws get smoothed over in our memory, and suddenly they're perfect, and you kind of forget all the hard stuff.
Sure, and I think that extends not necessarily even in the loss of someone through death, but I think that there are plenty of relationships that close out in a similar fashion that's abrupt, and you also still kind of, you remember the good parts more than you remember the hurts or the wrongs. And in its own way, I guess that's grief's way of, I don't know, softening the blow. And I think sometimes it also reveals something, you know, really kind of painful in this mix as well, is that there was stuff that we wish we would have said, or things we could have done differently, or even things that we know we would have handled their emotions differently.
Yeah, and this is why the gap matters. Because even if you're not sure how to fix a relationship, you don't have to be left wondering, like, what would have happened if I had just tried?
And that's why it is important that, you know, we stress that crossing the gap. And it's not to be dramatic, but you don't always get the chance to go back and make some of these things real.
Yeah, look, so if something's off with somebody in your life, say it. Say the thing, ask that question, and clear the air.
Yeah, because when the gap closes on its own, you want to make sure that you've done your part. You crossed it, you experienced it, you asked those questions, you tried, and for what it's worth, you showed up for your part of this.
Yeah, and sometimes like the gap doesn't just close unexpectedly. Sometimes it stays wide open because we're not even reacting to what's real. We're not seeing the reality of it.
Yeah, and to that point, I think often we think we're arguing about what just happened, but realistically, we're arguing with a memory, with a version of someone that we haven't allowed that growth and those next steps for either.
Yeah, like let's talk about that. It's very frustrating, and honestly, it's really common. It's one of the causes of these gaps. Like sometimes you're not actually arguing with the person in front of you. You're arguing with a memory, a ghost, the 2018 version of them.
Yeah, it's like emotional time travel, right? But but not the cool kind. More like it's this idea of let me fight with the version of you that forgot my birthday 5 years ago, and I'm still hurt by it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're looking at you like, "Why are you coming at me with 2018 energy when I've been in therapy and I've been drinking water 8 glasses a day?
I do yoga." Yeah, and I think this happens quite often, especially in like long-term relationships. Partners, siblings, long-term career coworkers and stuff like that. I think your brain forms patterns around the old version of someone, and I think often we allow ourselves to get lazy in our consideration of others, and it keeps your brain keeps handing you this same story, even when that person's sitting across from you. They have been doing the work, and they are making some changes too.
Look, and you know what? There's actually some research out there that points to the idea that our brains will grab whatever memory is the easiest to access. And it's not always the most accurate.
Yeah, and that's fair, because let's consider, I don't know, maybe your coworker was, like flaky or inconsistent in the past. Your brain is like, boom, evidence, always on the surface. Like even if they have, progressed past that, and they've shown up and they've done the work, and they have put the time in to increase their productivity, I still think that we often are just stuck on that old script. So when someone treats you like your old self, even though you've grown, I think it stings just the same way. And when you treat someone like their old self, you are ignoring their progress.
That hits home. That absolutely hits home. The bottom line, if the story's outdated, maybe we need to update the script. Don't let your brain run the rerun when real life is kind of trying to write a new season.
Absolutely. And we've talked in the past about shedding our own false narratives and getting out from underneath those. I think that probably one of the things that holds us back is that too often we are inconsiderate in allowing that same shedding of false narratives from those that are across from us, the people that we're dealing with. But I do think that's why relationships they just feel so complicated sometimes, because you're showing up with your stories and your patterns and your practices and all of your emotional history. But likewise, they're showing up with theirs. Mm-hmm. It's like it's two different operating systems trying to, sync without, crashing the whole computer system.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're not trying to manage a relationship. You're trying to stay connected with somebody, and to somebody who's not you.
Sure.
Different past, different personality, different needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we need to talk about what happens when that gap, when it's not necessarily and entirely, in your control. Here's the deal. We talk about owning your role in relationships, but let's be clear. Once again, you can't take ownership of all of it.
Yeah, I mean, coin doesn't mean taking responsibility for somebody else's silence or their avoidance or their unwillingness to grow. It means owning your side of the bridge.
Yeah, and that other person, again, they're autonomous as well. They're their own person. And sometimes they don't want to meet you in the middle. And
Why not?
Here's the good part, though. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's possibly a reflection of their capacity or their choices or maybe what bandwidth they have available to them emotionally at the time. It's a representation of where they may be in life, not you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get stuck there. I can get stuck there. You just think like, if I say it better, if I do more, if I'm patient, they'll come around. But sometimes they won't. And dragging yourself through emotional gymnastics to force that connection, like that's not growth. That's really self-abandonment. It's self-betrayal, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's worth saying that you can't coin for someone else. You can't cross the gap for them. You can be honest, you can be intentional, and you can be clear from your standpoint. But let's be honest, you can't drag someone else across that gap.
Yeah, and we've talked about boundaries before, and that's actually part of closing a gap or sometimes walking away from the gap. Like you're not giving up on the relationship, but you can give up on the illusion that it's all on you.
Yeah, it's like two people, like, I don't know, holding opposite ends of some, like a jump rope or something. If one person drops their end, you can't keep that motion in play. And no matter how fast or how well you try to swing your arm around and round to make the jump rope work, it just won't. It takes two folks for that.
I thought one was enough. It's not true.
It's
all
not.
right.
But a quick caveat before we go much further. If we're going to talk about the things of like protecting ourselves and being defensive enough to not self-abandon, this is still not to set up the aspect to where you don't have ownership, because in many of the ways of talking about how we can't own all of the discussion, we can't own all of the problem within a relationship, we can't own all of the closure of the gap, that is not to remove you from your responsibility. So you do have those responsibilities, and you can't abandon your ownership in that as well. Even though we want to talk about self-abandonment, let's not go so far to swing the pendulum away from the fact that you do have a role in where you are in a relationship. And so this is not to forgive you for everything you've done wrong in the relationship either. So back on track with that self-abandonment. It really is when you start editing yourself and shrinking and hiding and holding back truths just to keep the peace or keep the connection alive. But what is the cost of doing business that way?
Yeah, that's the difference. What you were talking about, shrinking and hiding, that's self-betrayal. That's different than taking ownership of your role. I mean, here's the truth. If the only way to stay in the relationship is to keep stepping over your own needs, if you are unable to own your own truth, to own your authentic self, then the gap isn't just between you and them. It's between you and you.
Yeah, realistically, that's probably the worst kind of gap, right? Because once you stop trusting yourself, everything else starts to feel unstable. And your nature is completely like unstable and rocky, and you're not even sure what you want anymore.
Yeah, we've talked about this off the mic before. I was staying in relationships where you feel like you're constantly performing or you're constantly managing other people's comfort, and it ends up just disconnecting you from who you are.
Yeah, and it's that moment where you realize, like, I'm present, but I don't feel like I can show up. I'm there, but it's not authentically me.
Yeah, and here's what sucks. That kind of self-abandonment is usually pretty quiet. Like it doesn't show up like an explosion. It's subtle. It's just kind of letting things slide. It's biting your tongue until your freaking mouth is sore.
Absolutely. And that's why the practice of coin specifically and especially the confirm and owning parts, I mean, they're so damn important because if you're not paying attention, you'll start calling it, like your duty for your work duty and your office responsibilities, or I mean, it could be out of love in a romantic relationship. I don't want us to forget that this applies across the board. It's not one type of relationship.
Sure.
But it really is just sort of the basis from fear.
Yeah, it's just fear. Like the fear of screwing it up at work or being a terrible parent or just being rejected. Just the fear of being your full, honest self and some kind of fear that that's going to make everybody run away.
Well, but I mean, let's be honest. If someone does walk away when you're showing up and you are showing up authentically, it's probably actually not rejection. It's clarity.
All right, I got to give that some air. That's powerful stuff. It's not rejection, it's clarity. So let's bring this back to the core point. Like, it's not just a mindset, it's a method. And when you apply it to different types of relationships, it becomes a roadmap for clarity and hopefully connection and maybe sometimes letting go.
Yeah, so again, start with C, confirm it. That means naming what actually is happening. Not what you wish was happening, not what used to happen or that old argument, but what's real, what's right now.
Yeah, I think we can ask ourselves, like, is this relationship where I want it to be? Or what am I feeling around this person? Do I feel like I'm shrinking down? Am I safe? Like, is this fulfilling?
Yeah, then comes ownership. Oh, that's your part, your patterns, your practices, whether it's your silence or your avoidance or your unreal expectations. Own what you've contributed to the gap, whether that's through action or inaction, maybe. And maybe you're just pretending that everything's fine, and maybe it's fine, and that's probably what's going wrong, is that it's not fine.
Yeah, and next is the intentionality, the I, the be intentional. Now that you know what's real and you've owned your part, what do you want this relationship to become? Like, what would you actually like to build or rebuild?
Yeah, and that part matters because if you don't get intentional, you'll just fall into the old habits, and those same struggles continue, and you'll think you're calling it progress, but it's not.
And finally, N, change the nature. If you assess, if you confirm it and you own it and you act with intention, you can bet that something about the situation is going to change.
Yeah, and sometimes changing the nature of whatever this may be, it may look different than what you thought. Maybe you have to step back and create some distance and do some redefining of your roles or their roles. Maybe it's actually leaning into this and creating a dynamic to where you get closer to that person physically or spiritually, emotionally, whatever needs to happen. I mean, yeah, that part can be hard, but that's what'll help change the nature of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and some of that hard stuff, it is necessary because coin isn't about fixing every relationship. It's about showing up with clarity and responsibility and intention and seeing what's possible from there. I mean, let's be honest, none of this is easy. Looking at the gap and owning your role and deciding what you want and changing something, I mean, that's some next level living we're talking about.
Yeah, you're right. It's not surface work. I mean, this isn't like 5 quick tips for fixing your relationship. I mean, this is deeper stuff. It's the stuff most people avoid because it requires that honesty and that vulnerability. It requires an effort, and it really requires this willingness to dig deeper and beneath the surface and see what's really there.
Yeah, and look, on this podcast, I mean, I agree, like, we're kind of editorializing to some degree. This is our perspective and our style, and we say it's fine and we laugh. But the coin process, that's not about us.
No, absolutely not. Look, coin, realistically, like coin is a mirror. It doesn't tell you who to be. It truly reflects who you are and what's actually going on in your life. That's why it works, because it's not based on hype or emotion. It really is based on your reality.
Yeah, I mean, like you bring your life to it, and it shows you where you're out of alignment. When you have to confirm it and own it, like you're not confirming my stuff, I'm confirming my stuff. I'm owning my stuff, you're owning your stuff. Two very different things. You know, the things that you're avoiding and where you need to grow, where you need to decide. Like those are the things that are going to rise to the surface for you when you employ coin.
Yeah, and so if this conversation has stirred something for you, if it's rung a bell in any way, that's a sign. That's an indication. The mirror's doing its job, as it were, you know?
I hope it does.
Sure.
Look, all right, everybody. I think we can wrap it up here. It's a lot to chew on. And look, if this did hit close to home, you're not alone. Like these are the things that we think about and process and work through all the time.
Yeah, keep in mind, we're all out here navigating relationships that are complicated and amazing and beautiful and frustrating, and practically every one of them is worth the effort. So, you know, take what you've heard today, look at those things really closely and stare them in the eye and use coin to help you move through it.
Look, and if you haven't yet, grab that book. It's at coinyourlife.com. We go in deeper into everything that we talked about here today.
Yeah, and remember, we'd love to connect with you, and we're asking, like, follow us on social media. Just search for Coin Your Life and join the conversation. Drop us a message, share your stories, send us some questions, any of those things. Reach out to us.
Yeah, because this is a community. And if you're doing the work, even just a little bit, you're already a part of it.
Absolutely. Hey, as always, thank you guys for listening, and we will see y'all next week.
I dig it.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out coinyourlife.com and find us on social media.